Ahoy folks, and welcome back to Broadside Gaming with me, Zug. So we have another build for you today, and this build is all about Terminus Warrant. So we will run through the gear, and then we'll get into talents. So again, like my other builds, these aren't, weapon specific. You can basically take whatever the hell you want. I will quickly run through a selection of, Arbites weapons you can pick. But it really doesn't change how the build works that much. You just literally pick the weapon you like the most because you're going to be the best at it with that weapon. And again, I'm not going to draw out these builds into a different variant for each different weapon because that feels scummy to me. So, as you can see, all of these weapons are going to have either mobility or defense dumped off of them because they're rubbish. So you can take the Shock Maul, as you can see, perk-wise, Flak Unyielding, Execution High Voltage, or Unyielding Carapace with High Voltage and Execution. You can also take one of these blessings off and put on Confident Strikes if you want something a little bit safer. Crusher, again, as you can see, defense is the dump. Perk-wise, it jumps between Flak and Unyielding and Carapace, depending on if you want to be hunting bosses or if you want to be hunting specials. Or you just want general purpose and go with Flak. Flak is the most prevalent arm type in the game, so it is always a safe bet. Blessings-wise, Skull Crush and Slaughter are the meta blessings for the Crusher. Anyone that says different is wrong. That's just it, really. Or you've got yourself the Shock Maul and the Suppression Shield. A weapon I really love because it works the exact same way as the Ogryn Slab Shield. It's just better. Again, on these, you can dump off one of the blessings. I would suggest Confident Strikes if you want to go for more damage. Otherwise, stick with Confident Strikes. High Voltage is always good. As you can see, perk-wise, Unyielding Carapace or Flak and Unyielding. Again, as I said before, depending on whether you want something general purpose or a little bit more specialised. And for the ranged weapons, again, pick whatever the hell you want, whatever you're best at, or whatever you fancy playing with that day. They're all good, they all work very, very well. Shotgun-wise, I tend to go for the Mark III because it's got more ammo and does more damage, although the secondary shot is a bit crap compared to the other one. I know, it's a shock. You're not going to use it very often, just forget it's there. Again, mobility is the dump. Mannequin Flak. Flak and Unyielding, depending on what you're trying to do. Are you trying to hunt down bosses? Are you hunting down specials? Blessings-wise, we've got Execution and Fire Frenzy. Very good buffs for the shotgun, work very well. And then we've got the Quick Draw Stub Revolver. This is going to be very, normal to most of the old players because this is generally how it was built back in the day. Again, mobility is the dump, perk-wise, Maniac and Flak. Blessings, Hand Cannon and Surgical. Hand Cannon is going to give you that big punchy damage. Surgical is going to get you to the levels of crit you need to proc Hand Cannon. And also, don't forget the Quick Draw Stub Revolver can just be mag dumped into a Crusher to make it go away. Same with the Spearhead Bolt Gun. It's not a very elegant weapon, but by God is it powerful. Dumpster again, mobility. Perk-wise, I'm going with Unyielding and Maniac. Maniac to snipe out the specials, Unyielding just to lay down damage on bosses, really. I mostly use the ranged weapons on the Arbites to lay down fire into bosses that I can't get near, or to snipe out annoying specials that are just generally being arseholes. Blessings-wise, Pinning Fire and Fire Frenzy are pretty damn good. There are some other options, but I don't tend to use them. And then we've got the Subductor Shot Pistol and Riot Shield, a hilarious combination of melee safety and ranged nastiness. For the modifiers, of course, mobility is the dump stack because it sucks. Perk-wise, Maniac and Flak, or Unyielding and Flak. And then blessings-wise, we've got No Respite and Full Bore, or Full Bore and Fire Frenzy. At the moment, I'm using No Respite and Full Bore because I find it to be the most useful. So before we get into the curios, which we will get into, don't you worry. The reason I like the shield pistol is because you can do stupid things like, oh dear, I'm being shot lots. Nah, I'm not. You may only get 5 shots, but it is pretty damn quick to reload. You can pause the reload animation if things get hairy. It doesn't start it from the beginning though. It just takes, starts up where you left off. It does take a little bit of ramping up, but once you start swinging, your damage will be, upped for it. But from a cold start, you're not quite one-tapping, but once you get going, you will be. And of course, your special action button is a lovely, lovely chill slam. Doesn't do much to Ogrins though. That's what the shooty end's for. Right, curios. The curios are exactly the same as they've always been because I find this is the best setup. We've got 2 twinned toughness curios here with toughness, stamina, and damage resistance gunners. And then we've got 1 stamina curio with +3 stamina, toughness, stamina regeneration, and corruption resistance. If you're not playing Havoc or Auric, you can dump out the corruption resistance to something else you fancy. Basically, whatever you want. Sniper resist, gunner resist, toughness regeneration if you really want to. Or, whatever. Maybe just 5 health, be cheeky. But there you go, we have the gear. Let's jump into the build. So we're starting off pretty standard. This is my go-to at the top here. We've got Hammer of Judgment, 10% melee attack speed for 3 seconds on hitting 3 or more enemies with a melee attack. Into Force of Will, replenish 10% toughness on staggering a melee attack, which is basically all of our melee attacks. Up close, replenish 5% toughness on close kill. Into Walk It Off, spending 1 stamina, replenishes 15% toughness over 3 seconds. Toughness damage reduction into Remote Detonation. Again, here you can basically pick your poison. It doesn't change the build that much. I like Remote Detonation because you can chain stagger bosses and Ogrins and, you can generally be really annoying with it. The Shock Mine is really good for defending points or laying down, slowing traps for things that are coming after you. And then you've just got the Grenade, which is, a grenade. It's not a bad grenade. It's good, but it's not as funny as the other 2. And then we've got into here, we've got the Arbitrator Armor, which doesn't need any explanation, into Ammo Belt for plus 25% ammo capacity. The only reason I'm taking this really is because we're going with Terminus Warrant, which is quite range heavy. Into Concussive, melee weak slot hits make the enemy count staggered. Suppression Protocol, hitting 3 or more enemies with an attack grants you 20% toughness damage reduction for 5 seconds. Into Breaking Descent, you and your allies' incoherency deal an additional 10% damage versus staggered enemies. Toughness. Again, taking Unleashed Brutality, you can pick whatever the hell you want. I highly advise not taking Lone Wolf. But, it's up to you. I'm not your mum. I'm not going to put little notes in your lunchbox. Pick whatever you want. Cleave Boost into Cascade Stance again. Cascade Stance is insanely good. It's my favourite thing to pick on this because it basically makes things trivial when things get difficult. And then we're taking up Writ of Execution because it's the only decent point out of all of these. Now, with Cascade Stance, you can use it actively, whereas I'm walking into a big group of angry things and I want to not take damage and also do lots of damage in return. But that's not the only way you can use it. If you have a lot of, say, Crushers, Reapers or whatever bearing down on you, or even Poxbursters, this is the best thing. If there are a lot of Poxbursters bearing down on you, you can't get in there to knock them back, or somebody's knocked them into you, which happens all the goddamn time. You can pop Cascade Stance to nullify most of that damage. You will still take some damage, but I have taken up to 3 Poxbursters on Auric, and they have not broken my toughness. So it's a very, very powerful defensive ability as well as an offensive ability. And that's why I like it. But there you go, Cascade Stance, and a few other things you can do with it. We'll start over here on the right first. Hold the line. Staggering an enemy grants 1 stack of +3 damage resistance on the next melee hit taken, stacking 5 times, and lasting 8 seconds. Staggering a non-human sized enemy, an Ogren, grants 5 stacks. And then we've got Target the Weak. Enemies staggered by your melee attacks take 15% more damage for 5 seconds. And then we've got the Emperor's Fist, plus 15% melee damage and 30% impact on the first enemy hit with each attack. There is no internal cooldown on this. Then we've got Weight of the Lex, gains 15% damage for 5 seconds after a heavy melee attack. Drive them back, pushing grants 75% cleave for 5 seconds, always useful. And then strike down, plus 15% melee rending on staggered enemies. And now for the middle. We're taking Street Smarts to gain 1 effective dodges and 25% dodge duration, and then we're taking Monstrosity Hunter, plus 20% damage to Ogryns and Monstrosities, and then we've got lovely, lovely Terminus Warrant. Now this kind of works like the Veteran one, which works on weapon swap. This does work on weapon swap, but it's on the usage of the weapon. You have 30 stacks, and you kind of balance them either way. The more you use your melee, you will buff your range. The more you use your range, you'll buff your melee. And I'll read out what it says so it makes more sense to you. Range attacks grant stacks of melee justice for each enemy hit. Max. So it's hit, not kill. Okay. Max 30 stacks. Melee hits remove 1 stack while you have stacks of melee justice. Gain 15% melee damage and 25% melee impact. Melee hits, on the other hand, grant stacks of range justice. Max 30 range stacks remove 1 stack from each enemy hit, while you have stacks of range justice. Gain 15% range damage, 50% range cleave, and 50% suppression, which is quite funny. Suppression's kind of slept on in this game, but it basically forces things into cover and to suddenly go, oh, maybe I shouldn't be shooting at him. So suppression is quite good, but I wouldn't build for it in really anything else. Then we've got Dispense Justice. While you have stacks of range justice, you have 20% reload speed. While you have stacks of melee justice, you gain an additional 100% melee toughness regeneration, and allies incoherence replenish 25% toughness of any toughness that you replenish. Toughness, toughness, toughness. Obstinate, swapping your melee weapon while you have 15 stacks of melee justice or more grants you 15% melee attack speed until you run out of stacks, or swap to your range weapon. Swapping to your range weapon, on the other hand, while you have 15% range justice stacks or more, grants you 15% fire rate until you run out of stacks, or swap to your melee weapon. And last but not least, Writ of Judgment. Swapping to your melee weapon while at 30 melee justice stacks grants you 15% melee rending until you run out of stacks, or swap to your range weapon. Swapping to your range weapon while at 30 range justice stacks grants you 25% critical strike damage and 25% weak spot damage until you run out of stacks, or swap to your melee weapon. When I first used this, I didn't think much of it, but as I was working towards the achievements, penances, whatever the hell it was, the more it got me thinking that this is actually quite a fun way to play, because it rewards you for basically messing around with all of your weapons. Instead of just, charging in and just swing, hit, it actually rewards you to think, oh, I could pull back here, pop off a couple of shots, and then wade back in again. I just found it fun, to be honest. Is it as good as the other ones? The other Keystones, that is? I don't know. Execution Order's pretty good. Not particularly interesting, but it's good. And then Forceful, again, it's pretty good. I think this kind of forces you to play quite differently, and it's enjoyable. So, if nothing else, there you go. That's my take on the build. It's fun. Also, it works really well in Havoc and in Auric. So, there you have it, folks. If you want yourself a delightful Terminus Warrant build, there you go. I do hope you enjoy it, and if you have, please do like, subscribe, ring that bell for notifications. It really does help us out, and I shall see you all for the next one. So until then, take it easy. I'll see you later.